I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes, on telly, DAB and online. Cheers very much for your company. We've got so much to come on today's show, including, as the Channel migrant crisis grows, is it time to leave the European Convention on Human Rights to really take back control? Plus a GB News exclusive. We reveal wind farms could earn millions from the energy crisis through government subsidies. We'll have reaction. But first, here's the news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 2 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Now, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says the government is not making a real difference on migrant crossings. At least 300 people have been intercepted on up to 9 small boats in the English Channel so far today. Yesterday, the Ministry of Defence confirmed that 254 people arrived in 7 boats. That follows 11 days without crossings, with strong winds and choppy seas believed to have been a factor. Sir Keir says an international coordinated criminal response is needed.
I've worked on international criminal organisations before when I was Director of Public Prosecutions. I know what can be done if you've got teams working together across Europe, all the way along those routes, absolutely bearing down on these criminal gangs and working very closely with the French authorities as well.
In Ukraine, Mariupol officials say Russia resumed shelling the besieged steelwork plant as soon as buses carrying civilians had left. President Zelensky says around 100 people were evacuated from the site on Sunday. Footage shows them emerging from the plant's rubble and being led to waiting coaches. Mariupol resident Natalia said she had to hide in a nearby basement during the shelling of the steel plant.
We lived in the basement starting from the 27th of February. We didn't leave because our house is in close proximity with Azovstal. The whole time we were shelled with mines, and then airstrikes started. Our house is completely destroyed. We have a 2-story building. It's not there anymore. It burned to the ground.
Ukraine's Navy has released footage of what it claims shows a drone strike hitting 2 Russian high-speed patrol boats. The Raptor-class boats are said to have been destroyed at dawn near Snake Island in the Black Sea. Moscow's not yet responded to the claim, and GB News cannot independently verify the video. In some other news now, Conservative MP Crispin Blunt has announced he's going to stand down at the next election. Last month, the former Justice Minister apologised for causing significant upset and concern after he tweeted to show support for an MP who was found guilty of sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy. Blunt originally claimed the MP, Imran Ahmed Khan, was the victim of a dreadful miscarriage of justice before then issuing an apology. A senior Conservative is rejecting calls to introduce an all-women shortlist to replace the former MP Neil Parish. Parish sparked a by-election in his Tiverton and Honton constituency after he resigned, having admitted watching pornography in the Commons. Some Conservatives had suggested a female candidate should replace him. The Minister for Higher and Further Education, Michelle Donnellan, told GB News imposing arbitrary quotas does not do women any favours.
I find quotas demeaning to women. Women can certainly get there on their own merit. We've seen that with 2 female prime ministers in my own party. We have a Home Secretary who's female, a Foreign Secretary who's female. What we need to be doing is encouraging women to come forward to stand, removing the barriers.
A record 2.7 million people have been referred for cancer checks over the last year. NHS data shows the number of patients receiving treatment for cancer has risen by 2,000 since the start of the pandemic. The NHS says it's expanded its services diagnostic capabilities with one-stop shops for tests and mobile clinics. The director of the Barts Cancer Centre, Tom Powles, told GB News the NHS needs more staff.
Cancer remains our number one killer, will be in the future, and now we have this huge healthcare problem. Do we have the resource to deal with it, which is your question? The human resource we probably don't have right now.
Some breaking news for you. A man's been stabbed to death near St Paul's Cathedral in London. City of London police said officers found a man suffering from serious injuries close to the landmark at 11:30 p.m. yesterday. The identity of the victim is unknown. No arrests have been made. We'll keep you up to date on that story. Now, the Prime Minister is considering giving housing association tenants the right to buy. The Telegraph are reporting that Boris Johnson has asked officials to draw up plans to help young people struggling to get onto the property ladder in England. Freddie Poser of the campaign group Priced Out says the government simply needs to build more homes.
This wouldn't help solve the housing crisis. The housing crisis is fundamentally one of supply. We need to find a world where we're building enough houses. Playing around with things like right to buy for housing associations will simply mean that there's less social and affordable rent properties available in 5 years, assuming we don't build them.
You're up to date on GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, let's head back to Real Britain.
Welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Here's what's coming up on the show. As the Channel migrant crisis grows, I'm asking if it's time to take back control of our borders and our courts by ditching the European Convention on Human Rights. We mark the 40th anniversary of the sinking of the Belgrano with one veteran's testimony of his time in the Falklands War. And we'll have a GB News exclusive on a potential windfall for wind farms from the energy crisis. That's what we're talking about for the next hour, folks. But as always, I would love to know your thoughts on all of the above. Tweet me at GB News or email me on gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can watch us online too on YouTube, and don't forget Facebook. Lots of brilliant content on the GB News page. Cheers very much. Now, folks, if you've been watching GB News today, you'll know that Nigel Farage has been reporting from the English Channel this morning, predicting that more than 1,000 migrants will cross the Channel this week, despite, of course, the Prime Minister's new asylum plan, with at least 300 people coming over today alone, GB News has confirmed. Now, of course, one of the most significant issues that so many of us have with this illegal migration is that we have absolutely no idea who these often undocumented migrants are. Do they share our values? Do they mean us harm? Will they follow our laws? Goodness only knows. And folks, look, even if they didn't come here to abide by our rules, after so blatantly breaking them in entering our nation illegally, to begin with, of course, thanks to a myriad of human rights laws, there is precious little, folks, that we can ultimately do to remove them. And according to the Times, one of the flagship bills in the Queen's speech on May the 10th, the Queen's speech setting out the legislative agenda for the next session of Parliament, will reportedly contain an overhaul of human rights legislation, an overhaul that would give Britain the power to deport serious foreign criminals. In most cases, it would be automatic. It's a move that may well mean we'll leave the European Convention on Human Rights. The ECHR, this convention, it's often used to curtail the UK's ability to remove foreign criminals via Article 8 of the ECHR, which protects the right to family life, meaning foreign criminals with relatives here in Britain have been able to avoid being deported by claiming, through lefty lawyer legalese, that we would be infringing upon their right to be near to their family here in Blighty. In an utterly perverse ruling, Justice Secretary Dominic Raab offered an example of a man convicted of domestic violence who avoided deportation by claiming that his right to family life would be impacted by said deportation. That's a patently absurd and an abuse, frankly, of laudable-sounding legislation. The Ministry of Justice reckons that Article 8 is used in about 7 in 10 successful challenges against deportations. And if you ask me, folks, if taking back control from the EU's open borders is to mean anything, then we have to be able to remove those who come here to break the law. I'm afraid we've become a soft-touch nation, right? It should be UK courts and UK legislation by those elected by us that put into place Britain's human rights laws. If Brexit meant absolutely anything at all, it must put our courts, our parliament and our borders above those of Strasbourg. Now, folks, the Pestminster scandal rumbles on with Speaker of the House, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, calling for radical action and a review of working practices. This is after a series of sexual misconduct and bullying claims about politicians. Only 2 weeks ago, the Conservative MP Nick Fletcher was calling for a Minister for Men to help boost male role models. And I asked the question, do we need a Minister for Men? I was joined by Mike Buchanan, the leader of the Children and Family Party, and Jean Hatchett, a feminist activist and writer, to discuss the possible role. Jean Hatchett told me there was a fundamental question to answer before we talk about a Minister for Men.
What is a man? Because we're currently being put under, we're seeing politicians put under pressure to define what a woman is, but no one's actually asking what a man is. And until we sort that question, we can't really go much further. I think it's important that we address the issues for men, male suicide, for example, which is at a terrible high and you know, significantly higher than for women. I acknowledge that. I have concern for that. But we also have to acknowledge the issue with men. And, you know, we have a real issue with men murdering people, but specifically men murdering women. There's a rape conviction rate of less than 1% in this country. And so we have a high proportion of men who are raping women. So I don't want to go down that traditional feminist route of let's just, when we're addressed with this issue of a Minister for Men, just smash into men. I think, you know, there are issues there to be addressed. But when we're talking about this, we've also got to look at why certain things can't happen that would solve issues for men around this question of what a man is. And so if you've got the case that it is unsafe for men to go into male space, then if they are wearing a dress or lipstick, for example, why is that impossible? Why must they then seek refuge with female people in female space? And I think, you know, there are some issues right at the heart of this with this kind of gender identity ideology, which pose questions for both men and women. But until we can sort that question, we really can't talk about a Minister for Men because we don't know what men are.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fundamental point. Mike, I'm assuming that you're a bloke, but how do you actually think we should go about this idea of a Minister for Men?
Well, I mean, for a start, I've never heard such complete nonsense as I've just heard, even from a feminist. Should there be a Minister for Men? Of course there should. the idea of having a minister for women, and by the way, there are 3 ministers. There's a minister for women and equalities, a minister for women, and a minister for equalities. Jobs for the girls or what? I mean, talk about non-jobs. But there are so many areas where men's rights are assaulted, and I'm very pleased to be speaking with a woman whose website tells me that she is very interested in men's violence against women. Nothing on there at all that I could see about women's violence against men. And I can tell you, I'd be happy to read out a few sentences, which show that intimate partner violence in heterosexual couples, in the majority of those couples, the violence is mutual. Okay, so sometimes the man starts, sometimes the woman does, but in the 40% or so where the violence is one way, always one way, the perpetrator is twice as likely to be the woman as the man, and the victim twice as likely to be the man as the woman. And this has been known for decades. And,
so,
and
Mike,
the best place
in your opinion, this is long overdue then? We should have done this years ago?
Yes, I mean, to have a minister for women makes about as much sense as having a minister for rich people. Women and girls are already some of the most privileged human beings ever to walk the planet. The idea that they need specific ministers is absurd. And the reason it's so difficult to get a minister for men is that would put a focus on all the many disadvantages and human rights violations that men have in this country.
Right, yeah. I mean, Mike, I don't think Jean disagreed with some of the points there about the fact that men are facing a higher suicide rate, for example. Jean raised that herself. But Jean, it must be quite something to hear from Mike there that women are the most privileged beings to walk the earth, given that right now, I think, as you rightly point out, women risk being erased from the national picture altogether.
Absolute nonsense.
I'd let Jean come back on that, and you can have your word.
I think I didn't know I was going to be speaking against Mike, which is why I've laughed pretty much through the whole of his segment. And it's kind of it's difficult to respond to that kind of viewpoint because, as I said, I'm very, very sympathetic to some of the issues facing men, like the largest cancer statistics in this country are breast cancer, but the second is prostate cancer. And clearly we have to address issues. I don't think it is, but, you know, I really can't, I can't really debate with somebody who is statistically inept. And I find that, you know, a bit of an insult to me because some of those statistics are being manipulated by Mike, and he's done that for many years now, but he's become a little bit of a laughingstock amongst most people. So, you know, 95% of perpetrators of domestic violence in jail are male. It's as simple as that. You cannot deny those figures. So I tried not to, drag it into that realm, but Mike has. So, you know, his statistics are inaccurate. But I really think, you know, when he's talking about nonsense, what I would ask Mike, if he wants a minister for men, and I haven't said I don't want a minister for men, what I've said is what they perhaps ought to address, as well as, some of the issues put forward by Nick Fletcher. I'd like to know, could then a person with a vagina or a female person be a minister for men, in Mike's view?
Yeah, well, Mike, what do you make of that? Because if we did have a minister for men, I wonder what you think the key role should be. What should it entail?
Jean has just raised an excellent area. There's never been a person of penis as a minister for women, has there? That's strange, isn't it? But to talk, prostate cancer has killed more men.
Currently, it could happen.
I tried not to interrupt. Prostate cancer has killed more men in this country than breast cancer has killed women for 2 or 3 years. But the point here, and it absolutely illustrates why we need a minister for men, is that there is no national screening program for prostate cancer. There are 2 screening programs for women-specific cancers, none for men. This is exactly
I think, Jean, your view, Jean, on that is very much you're sympathetic to those arguments, aren't you? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Can I point out that I suffer from ovarian cancer? So, you know, I nearly died. So I'd be sympathetic with either a male or a female suffering cancer and would like equity of access to healthcare for both those issues. Why would I not? But the point is, that we are being asked to refer to women with ovaries not as women, that we're being told that it's not okay to say the word womb and woman as a thing. And you know, I know this sounds like I'm going off on a tangent, but when you're talking about issues affecting men, then we're being asked to refer to ourselves as people with front holes. And,
horrible.
You know, this is not okay. And really, if we are targeting men's health issues, then why is that question never being asked of men, whether it's uncomfortable for them to be asked whether they can be pregnant or not? So there's got to be this real... We as feminists know, unless you address the question, what is a woman, you cannot have any rights attendant.
Well, speaking of that, Jean, speaking of that, another story that caught my eye was concerning the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Angela Rayner. She has condemned what she says is sexist and misogynistic article, a Mail on Sunday article, which claimed that Tory MPs have accused her of a basic instinct ploy, Sharon Stone-esque, to distract Boris Johnson by crossing and uncrossing her legs during debates. This post has received massive backlash. The Prime Minister's got involved and says that he deplores the misogyny directed at Angela Rayner anonymously through this article. Jean, is this an example of women facing misogyny today, and Mike just needs to get behind you because actually misogyny is still happening, clearly?
Mike's never going to acknowledge that. And, you know, like I say, I don't really... I don't expect Mike to ever change his views or take any kind of rational or balanced viewpoint on this. That's not happened over the last many years that he's been trying to...
Well, what do you make of this article, then? Were you personally offended by this, the fact that the Mail ran this?
I heartily condemn that attitude amongst the male Tory MPs that have tried to say that that's the case. I think, you know, Angela Rayner is being treated appallingly there. I think, though, at the same time, that maybe this is Angela needing to recognise exactly what being female is and what that entails, because she's one of the proponents of the fact that trans women are women. Well, this is not happening to trans women. This is happening to a female person because of sex. And yeah, there's a deep misogyny there. There's a deep misogyny in the way that she's been represented as being less intelligent than Boris Johnson, because she would need to resort to feminine wiles, if you like, to advocate her points or her politics. And so that would never happen to a man.
Right.
And also
Mike, you answer that then. That would never happen to a man. This wouldn't happen to a male politician. They wouldn't see this sort of post in the Mail on Sunday about them, would they?
Darren, you have allowed Jean to completely derail a discussion about a Minister for Men by their current pet obsession. I could name 16 areas where the human rights of men and boys in the UK today are assaulted. I would very much like to hear, without talking about trans women, I'd very much like Jean to tell me areas where the human rights of women and girls in Britain today are assaulted.
So, Mike, did you not think that article about Angela Rayner was misogynistic in any way, shape or form?
I think people see misogyny everywhere. It is actually very rare, whereas misandry, the hatred of men and boys, is everywhere. And radical feminists like Jean, are the great exemplars of that. So I wonder, Jean, can you tell me some areas? I can give you 16 areas in a few seconds where the human rights of men and boys are assaulted by the state today, almost always to advantage women. Can you tell me any areas where, without talking about trans women, where the human rights of women and girls today are assaulted?
Okay, so as I've said before, we have a current rate where women are raped at a rate of about 78,000 to 80,000 a year. And we've got you, sorry.
Rubbish.
And
70,
so
I'd like to show your viewers.
Mike, you asked Jean a question, so you've got to let her answer the question.
Can I speak? So we've got women murdered at a rate of 1 every 3 days by men. We've got women raped by a current or former partner once every 4 days. We've got women who are systematically, failed by the CPS. That is a state institution, Mike. That is working for the state. Such that we've got a conviction rate of less than 1%. So how can you then tell me, I am absolutely on board with you discussing the issues that you want to discuss, but you have to acknowledge that women are suffering really quite serious consequences of male violence. And if you're talking about Nick Fletcher, who is a close colleague of Philip Davis, who filibustered a bill in 2017. He spoke for 90 minutes to prevent advances for women.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there, folks, but this debate could rumble on and on. And hey, I'm sure it will rumble on and on. That was the feminist activist and writer Jean Hatchett and Mike Buchanan, the leader of the Children and Family Party, speaking to me last month about this issue that is rumbling on. Now, it's funny how it's now reported that Angela Rayner was the source of the Basic Instinct story, it has to be said. Plenty more to come this afternoon on Real Britain. Next, we'll be going back to basics in our virtual classroom. Today's subject is the sinking of the Belgrano during the Falklands War, as we mark that 40th anniversary of the event. See you after a short break.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The time is 2:26, and folks, we're going to pop to my virtual classroom now. Today marks the 40th anniversary of the sinking of the Argentine ship, the General Belgrano, during the Falklands War. It was shot by the British nuclear-powered submarine HMS Conqueror, with the loss of 323 lives. But folks, why did it happen, and what impact did it have on the Falklands conflict? Joining me to discuss this, I'm delighted to say, is the Major General Chip Chapman, who fought in the Falklands War and was the former head of counter-terrorism at the MOD. Let's go back to the beginning, if you wouldn't mind. Why did the Falklands War actually start?
Well, on the 2nd of April 1982, the Argentinians invaded the Falklands. So under Article 51 of the UN Charter, we had a right to go and under self-defence to take them back. There had always been a diplomatic dispute between us for a number of years. So the Argentinians invaded, and 5th of phase one of the operation is the southward deployment of warships and aircraft, leading ultimately on the 21st of May to the land invasion and the reclamation of the islands by making the Argentinians surrender.
Yeah, Chip, so do you think, because we still hear this now, don't we? We still hear Argentina saying, well, hang on a minute, we've got a claim to these islands. Why do we still hear that today? Why didn't this war address those issues? Or in your view, it very much did?
Well, it did in the sense that there's a difference between conflict termination, and the Argentinians surrendered to us, and conflict resolution. And conflict resolution is that wider piece about, sovereignty and all that. Now, we think that the sovereignty of the islands is set to bed because there was a referendum in 2013 on the self-determination issue, of which 99.8% of the people in the Falkland Islands wish to remain a British overseas territory under the UK.
Was there ever, in your eyes, when you were out there, it must have been terrifying, was there ever, in your view, a sense of why are we going all the way out here to fight for a British overseas territory, risking our lives? Or was there always a deep sense of mission and purpose behind what you and others were doing there?
Well, we all thought it was a just war. You don't invade someone else's territory, of which, people will recall something in the last 2 months, and let people get away with it. That does upend the international order and international rules-based order around the world. And that's why there are parallels between the Falklands and the Ukraine in lots of ways. And the Belgrano illustrates that. Some people say the sinking of the Belgrano today on the 2nd of May is controversial. It's not if you understand about the power of signals intelligence, SIGINT, which we're also seeing in the Ukraine. So on the 1st of May, the Argentinians were given freedom of action and ordered for the commencement of offensive operations by their 3 different groups of naval forces. That could have led to a pincer movement, particularly from the north, and effectively using their naval aircraft to take out some of our carriers. And they could have won the war quite early in May if they'd have done that. So in terms of the sinking of the Belgrano, it was proportionate and necessary, and would have been a dereliction of duty not to do so, given that signals intelligence. It was good SIGINT, well used.
Some have argued that actually the General Belgrano was turning around, though, haven't they? And that actually it wasn't proportionate. You would vehemently disagree with that view.
Yeah, and basically you have to look at the outcome of this. What happened after that operation? That confined the Argentinian Navy to brown water operations, that is, operations off the coast of Argentina, not to interfere with the remainder of their campaign, and particularly the landings. So from an operational and strategic perspective, it was absolutely justified, and as I said, would have been a dereliction of duty not to have done so.
Speaking of derelictions of duty, we have seen over recent years, you go back to the Cameron administration, you've got Theresa May's time in office. We've seen that the Ministry of Defence hasn't been a budget that's had its resources ring-fenced. Do you think there's been a dereliction of duty amongst British leaders over recent time to actually take their eyes off the ball, and we're all suffering the consequences now with the state of the MOD? Do you think more resources are vital for continued defence of the realm?
Well, there's 2 separate issues there. One is the size of the budget, which generally is quite large. It's either the 4th or 5th largest in the world, depending how you look at it. Second issue is how you use it. And the real scandal is how we've been very, very poor at manipulating the equipment budget. And you've seen lots of overruns of costs and major failures in programs, the Ajax one being the particular one at the moment, when we have really no armoured fighting vehicle available at the moment. That's not because we've had a lack of money. It's been a lack of a equipment program being properly run to time. And that's been the big issue, not the size of the budget. We've always met up to now the NATO 2%, ahead of most countries. So I don't think the budget is necessarily an issue. That doesn't mean you reassess for the future based on what's going on in Ukraine at the moment.
Well, Major General Chapman, thank you very much for giving up your time today to give us your expertise. Former head of counter-terrorism at MOD, thank you very much for your time. Now, folks, you're with GB News on TV and DAB radio. Next, we'll reveal how wind farms could earn hundreds of millions more from the energy crisis after delaying government subsidy contracts in a GB News exclusive. But now, though, it's time for a check on the news headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 2:32. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date. At least 300 people have been intercepted on up to 9 small boats in the English Channel so far today. Over 250 people arrived in 7 small boats yesterday. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has denied that he broke COVID-19 lockdown rules while in Durham in April last year.
There was no party, there was no breach of the rules, and there's nothing really to add to that. Contrast that with Downing Street, where we know there have been 50 fines issued already in Downing Street in relation to goings-on in Downing Street. I think that makes Downing Street the most fined workplace in the whole of the United Kingdom already, and criminal investigations are going on.
In Ukraine, Mariupol officials say Russia resumed shelling the besieged steel plant in the city as soon as buses carrying civilians had left. Footage shows people emerging from the plant's rubble and being led to waiting coaches. One woman said she and her baby had been waiting for 2 months to be rescued. Ukraine's Navy has released footage of what it claims shows a drone strike hitting 2 Russian high-speed patrol boats. The Raptor-class vessels are said to have been destroyed at dawn near Snake Island in the Black Sea. Moscow has not yet responded to the claim, and GBNews cannot independently verify the video. A record 2.7 million people have been referred for cancer checks over the last year. NHS data shows the number of patients receiving cancer treatment has risen by 2,000 since the start of the pandemic. Thousands of voters will have no choice in who to vote for in Thursday's local elections, as some council seats only have one candidate standing. In the 91 seats impacted, the individual unopposed candidates will be elected automatically. You're up to date on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. Shortly, we'll be back to Real Britain.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Cheers very much for your company. Now, folks, as some of you may well be aware, Labour is demanding a windfall tax on oil and gas companies who've done quite well, thank you very much, from the surge in energy prices. The Tories oppose the tax, but their Secretary of State for Energy wrote to oil and gas firms over the weekend demanding the companies reinvest extra cash made during the crises. But both sides are keen to bash fossil fuel producers. No surprise there then. But did you know some wind farm developers are making huge extra profits on the back of the energy crisis at the expense of consumers? A GB News exclusive that's just been published on our website has revealed exactly that. The wind farms and their developers are not breaking any rules, but let's be clear, the generous green government contracts have allowed them to sell at higher market rates after unexpectedly delaying moving on to the contracts. An analysis published by GBNews shows the taxpayer could be, and this is quite shocking actually, £500 million worse off over 12 months due to a recently revealed and as yet unexplained delay at just one wind farm. So has the Tory rush to net zero resulted in a bad deal for taxpayers and consumers? Well, joining me to discuss this is Andrew Montford from Net Zero Watch, and he joins me now. Andrew, what are these contracts and why will the wind farms make more money by delaying moving on to these contracts?
When the government was trying to get people to build wind farms, essentially they discovered that nobody would do it unless there was a guaranteed minimum price. Market prices for electricity at the time were too low, and there was a risk that they might go lower. So what they did was they said, OK, we will agree that you can sell electricity at a fixed price, which was above market prices at the time. There was an assumption that if the prices went higher, well, then the wind farms would have to pay the extra back. But which is what is happening for wind farms that already exist. But for new ones, they're just saying, well, OK, we're not going to take up the contract we signed. We can delay. And the rules actually allow them to do that. They can delay for perhaps as much as 3 years. And the difference in the amount of money they can get per megawatt hour is enormous. So we have wind farms here that have contracts at perhaps £60 a megawatt hour, and they can sell into the market now at 200, 300, sometimes even £400 a megawatt hour. They are making unbelievable sums of money from this.
Well, the government would actually maintain that we need to do this, right? We need to go hell for leather on renewable technologies in order to meet our net zero commitments. Do you not think, as some may well argue, this is a price, literally, worth paying?
Well, I think the consumer struggling to pay his or her bills over the coming winter would disagree with that. These contracts they are far too generous in essence. They put all the risk onto the consumer and all the reward goes to the wind farm. So when prices go up, the contracts essentially say that the consumer has to cough up and the benefits. And as I said, you rightly pointed out, this is £500 million extra. That's just the extra for one wind farm.
Yes,
now,
I mean, responding to our
more
story,
wind farms
Andrew,
coming on stream in the next few years.
Well, yes, a lot more.
Which will be the same thing again.
Yes. I mean, when responding to this story, a government spokesman said developers should act fairly on this matter, recognising the public support they have received for development. And Steve Baker MP told us that pleading with wind farm developers in this way for fairness was an admission of massive regulatory failure. Are you basically of the view, Andrew, that the taxpayer is at real risk here, if not already, being massively ripped off?
Yeah, it's not so much the taxpayer as the consumer. This is money that essentially goes straight onto consumer bills. And yes, the consumers are being ripped off. I mean, to just sort of expand the story slightly, this is one subsidy scheme, the contracts for different scheme. The other scheme, the renewables obligation, is even more generous. There's people there making 200, 300, 400 in the market, and then they get another £100 per megawatt hour in subsidy on top. This is extraordinary. The amount of money that wind farms are making at the moment. So to come back to the top of the story, where you talked about the possibility of a windfall tax on fossil fuel companies, if you were going to tax fossil fuel companies, then we should be hitting renewables operators probably even harder, because they are making the serious money here.
Well, Andrew Montford, people on the green side of the argument, and I've had many on this show, to give me their view. have waxed lyrical about how actually a rush for renewables will be cost effective, will lower prices for consumers because the cost of wind and the cost of solar has massively decreased over recent years. I'm not getting that picture from what you've just painted or the story that we're running on our website now is concerned. Am I just naive? Am I being really stupid here? Why am I failing to recognise that compared to oil and gas, there's a real boon for the consumer here?
Okay, so that people believe that the cost of wind and solar is coming down is because these companies have signed these contracts at rather low prices. Now, but what we're seeing now is that they're just not taking them up. And it does look very much as if they will never take them up, in fact. I think we have probably reached the end of this scheme because the wind farms are making so much money in the free market now that they essentially don't need the subsidy. Now, the government has told us that these low-price wind farms are going to bring down consumer bills, but obviously, if they never take up the contracts, then no, they're not. What I think this means is it absolutely tears apart the government's strategy for reducing energy bills. It's in tatters, really. There's nothing left of it. These wind farms aren't going to take up their contracts, and the consumer is on the hook for billions and billions of pounds.
Well, Andrew Montford, we're going to have to leave it there. But all I can say to that is I really, really hope that in the same way that oil and gas firms who've received enormous amounts of scrutiny for making more money during the energy crisis, that wind energy receives the same level of scrutiny. But we'll see. Andrew Montford, Deputy Director of Net Zero Watch, thank you for your time. Now, folks, I just want to read out the full response to our story from the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. They say that the CFD scheme has been hugely successful in boosting UK energy supply and reducing our dependence on volatile fossil fuels, while also cutting costs for consumers, reducing the price of offshore wind by around 65% since 2015. Projects will not receive CFD payments while they are generating on market terms. We urge companies to act fairly on this matter, recognising the public support they've received for development. Well, I'm sure asking very nicely will work instantly. It's now 2:45 and time for Scrap Reform Keep. From today, magistrates can hand out jail terms of up to a year as their sentencing power is doubled. It's part of efforts to tackle a backlog in the courts, but some lawyers are warning it could lead to a large number of appeals. Well, joining me to discuss this story is the criminal defence lawyer, Nick Freeman. Nick, now come on, you know a thing or two about this. What on earth is this all about? Is this going to actually help reduce the burden currently on the court system?
Yeah, absolutely. It will immediately free up it's estimated about 1,700 days in the Crown Court. But there are several problems here. I mean, apart from a lack of investment, the way cases are listed in the magistrates' courts and the way the cases are listed in the Crown Court are very different. And in short, the magistrates' court is much quicker, it's much more efficient, it's less cumbersome. And prior to COVID, cases were being delayed massively. You know, some cases were going back 2 years. Some Crown Court trials, not complex trials, assault trials, particularly around London, were being delayed 2 years. And there's the old saying that, the old legal maxim, you know, justice delayed is justice denied. So the answer to your question is yes, it will speed things up rapidly because you either have a district judge or 3 lay magistrates dealing with it, which is far easier as a whole than a jury. But of course, it's important to remember that for most offences, about 80% of all offences at the moment go through the magistrates' courts. Obviously, with these increased sentencing powers, it will be far more. And that will free up the Crown Court to catch up on its backlog and leave them to concentrate on more serious matters, the most serious type of cases. But defendants will always have the right, for most offences, to decide where they want to be tried. So, for example, theft, burglary, most assaults, those sort of offences, that there is always a right of election by a defendant, which they can exercise. But if they do elect to go to the Crown Court, then of course there are increased sentencing powers, and they know there will be extra delays, which the courts are trying to get through. If you elect to have the case dealt with by a magistrate or magistrates, you'll have the case tried either by a judge or by 3 magistrates. It will be much quicker. And even with this extended power of sentencing, the sentences are limited, whereas at the Crown Court, they're obviously, most of them are limited, but they're much longer. So you make a choice and you take the consequences.
So, Nick, I'm assuming then you're very much in the keep camp for these reforms.
I can't see any disadvantage at all. It's important to note that this sentencing power was extended 20 years ago. And it was repealed actually in 2020. And it was repealed because all successive governments were concerned that magistrates would just send people to prison and the prison population would explode. In my view, there's no basis for that at all. Magistrates are trained. They do a fantastic job. They do have a qualified lawyer in court, a barrister or solicitor who is their legal advisor. And the system works really efficiently. And the system in the Crown Court needs to change. Even when they clear the backlog, however long that's going to take, they need to change their listing system because it's archaic. If it was a business, it would go bankrupt within days. You just simply couldn't run it the way it's run. So this is a way of getting things through quickly, but it doesn't remove the problem from the Crown Court, which is at its foundations, which is the listing of cases is completely wrong in my view, and it needs to be run much more on a business-like basis, including extending the time that people sit. You don't want to be starting court at 10:30, finishing for lunch, sometimes having a morning break, starting again at 2, having an afternoon break and finishing at 4:30. And I know there's arguments about concentration, but we need to eke out some more hours of the day. So there's a lot that can be done, but this will make a huge, huge difference. And in my view, there is absolutely no downside whatsoever.
Well, criminal defence lawyer Nick Freeman, I appreciate your thoughts and expertise. I tell you what, though, I imagine most people watching this will just be saying, I just wish we had access to justice as far as when I report a crime, it be investigated. I think all too often these days there seems to be a reluctance to actually bring about justice. But Nick Freeman, thank you very much for your time today. Now, folks, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have released photographs of their daughter, Princess Charlotte, to mark her 7th birthday today. The young royal is pictured here, and for our radio listeners, we've got a picture on the screen taken by the Duchess of Cambridge in the Norfolk countryside. And she's posing with her dog, Orla. It comes as the country gears up, of course, to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee next month, with Charlotte's grandfather, Prince Charles, urging us to plant a tree for the Jubilee. Well, joining me now to speak about this is the royal commentator, Rafe Heidel-McHugh. Hello, Rafe. Now, could we start by talking about that picture there, this new picture of Princess Charlotte taken by her mother? The Duchess of Cambridge, I must say, is really, really talented when it comes to photography.
Yeah, she's had quite some experience now. This is just the latest of a long series of snaps of her children that she's taken to mark these occasions. And I think it's a much more endearing setup than just having somebody from a professional photographic background coming. But she herself, as you say, does have quite the professional eye. This is one of a series of 3 photographs that have been released to mark Princess Charlotte's 7th birthday. The other 2 are family ones with all the children, but also the addition now in this one of a new dog called Orla, which means Golden Princess. No link, of course, to the royal family there. They say that it's just a nice name that they liked, but it's the first time that the dog has been introduced as well. And it's, I think we're going to see now much more of Princess Charlotte arriving on the royal scene, as we're going to be seeing the young children of the Cambridges taking a part in the Platinum Jubilee celebrations.
His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, of course, favours a more slimmed-down monarchy. We hear this quite a lot. Are we going to see the children and, indeed, the Duke of Cambridge, Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, used more in royal events, as of course the Queen is now at an age of 96. So naturally, she's going to take a more backseat role and the younger royals are going to step forward. How do you think that's going to manifest itself?
That's right. The idea of Prince Charles had always been to slim the monarchy down. And by slimming down, he really meant himself and his wife, his two children and their issue. And that's why in 2012, for the Diamond Jubilee celebrations, you only got that slimmed down monarchy on the balcony. People would remember from years past where everybody, including the Dukes of Kent and Gloucester, Prince Michael of Kent as well, the entire family was there. But in 2012, you didn't even get Andrew or Anne for that iconic appearance. Unfortunately, because of the disappearance of Harry and Meghan and Andrew, the three wayward royals, they've had to hastily create a new firm, a new slimmed-down monarchy, increasing the burdens on Princess Anne and Prince Edward. But that's really going to be something for the next 10 years or so. Everyone's really waiting for Prince George, Prince Louis, and Charlotte to basically get to an age where they can fulfill those roles. So yes, the important thing for them now is their schooling, but you'll see them more and more. And once they're ready, I'm sure it'll be a welcome relief for Edward, Sophie and Anne to finally enjoy a well-deserved retirement.
Yes, and tell us about this initiative by Prince Charles, who's calling on the nation to plant a tree to actually mark the occasion of Her Majesty's Jubilee.
Yes. Now, look, I know Prince Charles gets a lot of flack for his issues regarding the environment and sustainability and net zero and so forth. But I think this is an initiative really everyone can get behind because it's inherently a truly conservative and patriotic principle. He's the head of something called the Queen's Green Canopy, which is in favour, obviously, of greening the country. But this initiative is essentially about protecting 70 woodlands and 70 historic trees and ensuring that we can help develop our woodlands. And it's really the countryside that epitomises what it means to be British and English. The identity of Britain is intrinsically tied up with our idea of the countryside. And, someone like Sir Roger Scruton, a great conservative philosopher no longer with us, or if he were with us, he'd be a regular on GBNews, I'm sure, would really be behind this because it's about ensuring that we preserve local customs and traditions, craftsmen involved with woodwork as well. It's a great scheme, and it helps also to preserve some of our important heritages in that area. The tree that Isaac Newton saw the apple fall from, descendant of the tree that King Charles King Charles II rather hid in, the royal oak, other trees planted by royals, trees that inspired J.R. Tolkien when writing The Lord of the Rings. Our trees in that sense are as important as our statues.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. Rafe Heidel-Mancouf, thank you very much for your time today. Now, folks, you've been watching Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Cheers for your company. The show's on every Saturday and Sunday at 2 p.m. But for now, I'll leave you with the weather.
The UK is looking showery for many this afternoon. Let's take a look at the details. Starting off in the southwest, after a slow start, things should brighten up here through the afternoon, making it feel warmer than yesterday. Watch out for a few showers though. Over in the southeast and around London, it's likely to remain largely cloudy with just a few showers in the north. There will be further scattered showers across much of Wales this afternoon. Many places will avoid them though, with some warm, sunny spells instead. A similar picture as we look toward northwest England, where there will also be quite a few showers, but also some sunny spells. Temperatures will reach highs of around 16 or 17 Celsius. Coastal parts of northeast England may have some lingering fog. Further inland, it should be somewhat brighter, but there will be a few showers around, a little cooler here, with highs around 13 Celsius. Northern parts of Scotland will have a mostly fine afternoon with some lengthy, bright or sunny periods. Central and southern parts are going to be cloudier with some scattered showers. We can also expect a few showers to develop across Northern Ireland. These shouldn't be particularly heavy though, and there will be a few bright or sunny spells in between. Some showers easing as we go towards this evening, but continuing for Northern England and Southern Scotland.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're